Shaka Zulu. You hear that name and it just conjures up these powerful images, right? A warrior king, a nation builder, this almost mythical figure who redrew the entire map of southern Africa with a spear. But behind that legend is one of history's most fascinating and, frankly, most terrifying minds. In this explainer, we're going to conduct a kind of psychological autopsy, really dissecting the man who was both a military genius and a brutal tyrant, all to understand what kind of forces create a king like that.
So, to really get our heads around this guy, we're going to break it down into 5 key parts. First, we'll try to untangle the legend from the man. Then we'll dig deep into the traumatic childhood that literally forged him. After that, we'll see how he weaponized that trauma to invent a new kind of total war. Then we'll analyze the dark psychological tricks he used to hold on to absolute power. And finally, we'll connect his methods all the way to the geopolitics of today.
All right, so first things first, we have to deal with the central problem of Shaka Zulu. History just cannot seem to agree on who this man was. I mean, look at this. On one side, he's this bloodthirsty savage, a tyrant who ruled through nothing but pure terror. But on the other side, he's hailed as a brilliant military innovator, a unifier who built a powerful, disciplined nation. You see, these aren't just slightly different takes, they describe 2 completely different human beings.
And that really is the question at the heart of all this, isn't it? Was Shaka just a deranged monster and his brilliance was, I don't know, just a lucky side effect of his madness? Or was he a cold, calculating genius who understood that real power, the rawest kind, requires absolute terror? Well, the truth, as we're about to see, is a whole lot more complex and, honestly, a lot more disturbing.
To get the king, you have to start with the boy. Because to truly understand the brutal architecture of Shaka's power, you first have to look at the psychological wounds that he used as its foundation.
And, I mean, just listen to this. This quote was recorded from the kids he grew up with. It gives you a sense of the sheer cruelty he was up against. This wasn't just, kids being mean. This was a deep, psychological assault on his masculinity, on his very identity, day in and day out. It was personal, physical, and it never stopped.
Shaka's early life was basically a blueprint for creating bitterness. Think about it. He was an outcast from the moment he was born, illegitimate, kicked out of his home with his mom, and physically weak in a culture that valued strength above all else. Every single one of these wounds just festered. The shame of his birth created this obsessive need to be seen as the ultimate legitimate ruler. The ridicule about his body? It forged an obsession with creating the most physically perfect, disciplined warriors the world had ever seen. It all added up to a lonely, furious young man with a burning desire to prove everyone wrong.
In today's terms, this is a textbook case of what psychologists call reactive narcissism. It's a key idea in dark psychology. And it's not just about vanity or being arrogant. No, it's a defense mechanism. It's when these deep, deep feelings of insecurity and trauma boil over into this ruthless, relentless drive for power and control. Basically, the world hurt him so badly that he decided to build an internal fortress of absolute power so that no one could ever touch him again.
So, and this is the crucial point, his entire reign wasn't just a series of political moves, it was a public exorcism. He took all the demons from his private internal world, that feeling of helplessness, the rage, the need for revenge, and he unleashed them on the public stage of southern Africa for everyone to see.
So you have all this internal rage. What do you do with it? Well, if you're Shaka, you don't just participate in war, you completely remake it in your own brutal image, an image of total, uncompromising destruction.
Before Shaka came along, warfare in this region was almost like a sport. Seriously, it was ritualized, a lot of posturing and throwing light spears from a distance. The goal was to settle a score with as little bloodshed as possible. Shaka looked at that and thought it was pathetic and inefficient. For him, war had one single, terrifying purpose: the complete and utter annihilation of the enemy.
And this quote right here, this gets to the very heart of his ruthless, yet weirdly pragmatic philosophy. This isn't just chaos, it's the cold calculus of total war. From a game theory perspective, he gave his enemies a very simple binary choice. You either submit completely and become part of the Zulu nation, or you will be wiped off the face of the earth. No third option, no negotiation. It's brutal for sure, but it was an incredibly effective way to end all those little constant conflicts.
His genius was turning that philosophy into a literal killing machine. His most famous tactic, the buffalo horns formation, was a perfect tool for annihilation. Think of it. The chest slams into the enemy and pins them in place. Then, the fast-moving horns sweep around the sides, cutting off any chance of escape. And just when you think it can't get any worse, the loins, the reserves, come in to finish the job. It was a tactical system designed for guaranteed slaughter. And he professionalized this whole thing to an incredible degree. He grouped his warriors into regiments by age, not by what clan they were from. This shattered old loyalties and built a new, single Zulu identity. Each regiment even had its own color-coded shields. This wasn't some tribal militia. This was a standing, disciplined, national army that was loyal to one person and one person only, him. But this brings up a huge question, right? Traditional warfare was limited because, you wanted to keep your men alive. Shaka was demanding they run right into close-quarters combat with a short stabbing spear. How on earth did he get them to do that, to overcome that basic human instinct to survive? Well, the answer isn't just in military tactics, it's in psychology.
So, to command this new kind of army, Shaka knew he had to build an entirely new kind of state, one that ran not on loyalty or tradition or respect, but on absolute, paralyzing fear.
Centuries before Shaka, this guy in Italy named Machiavelli basically wrote the playbook on power. And he said, "It is far safer for a ruler to be feared than to be loved." Shaka probably never read The Prince, but man, he embodied that principle more completely than maybe any other ruler in history. For him, fear wasn't a side effect of his rule. It was the engine.
And he had a terrifyingly effective set of tools. Public executions were a daily thing, often for the smallest reasons, or sometimes no reason at all. He twisted traditional beliefs, using witch doctors to smell out and kill anyone he thought was a threat. He had spies everywhere, so even whispering a complaint was a death sentence. And the key was that the violence was often totally random, because if anyone could be next, for any reason, then everyone lived in a constant state of terror. What he really engineered was a culture of conspiracy. His own paranoia, born from his miserable childhood, became the official policy of the state. Your neighbor could be a spy. Your friend could be a threat. Mistrust wasn't a flaw in his system. It was the system. It's what held the whole terrifying thing together.
Now, you might be sitting there thinking, okay, this is just some brutal, ancient history. But here's the really chilling part. Shaka's playbook for how to grab and hold on to absolute power, it's timeless. And it is absolutely still being used today.
Let's just look at this for a second. When Shaka took out any chieftain who might one day challenge him, we see the exact same logic that modern authoritarians like Putin use to deal with political rivals. Shaka's use of public executions and witch hunts to purge dissent, that's a direct line to the Great Purges under Stalin and Mao, where terror became a tool of social engineering. And his spy network, which turned neighbor against neighbor, that's just the low-tech version of the massive digital surveillance states we see today. The technology changes, but the dark psychology of control, that's exactly the same. And in the end, there was a heavy price to pay for all of it. This historian, Alfred Bryant, wrote this back in 1929, and he just absolutely nails it. In the process of building his empire, Shaka remade himself into a monster. The very tools he used to get power, the cruelty, the paranoia, they ended up consuming him. He built a nation, sure, but he lost his own soul doing it. So, to finally answer our big question, was he a madman or a master strategist? The truth is, he was both. And you can't separate the two. His strategic genius was fueled by the pathology that grew from his trauma. His childhood wounds gave him the ruthless, burning ambition to shatter the world he knew, and his brilliance gave him the tools to actually do it. He was a terrifyingly effective fusion of both monster and maker. And that leaves us with one last really unsettling thought. Shaka created the Zulu nation, which became a source of incredible pride that lasted long after he was gone. But he forged it in a fire of unimaginable terror. His legacy forces us to ask a really difficult question about power itself. What happens when a nation's greatest builder is also its most terrifying monster?